help by allowing universities to expand beyond their physical campuses, attract international students through digital and hybrid learning options, and stay relevant in a changing world. Importance of online and hybrid learning. The University Without Walls approach is built on the foundation of digitalization and hybrid learning, making it a central strategy for modern internationalization efforts. By removing the physical limitations of traditional campuses, this model allows universities to engage with students across the world, making education accessible to all. Online learning growth. More than 50% of students in the United States were enrolled in at least one online course by fall 2022. This dramatic shift reflects the core principle of University Without Walls, providing education without the constraint of physical presence. Universities can now attract international students who may not be able to relocate, offering flexible learning through platforms, Coursera and edX. These digital platforms allow institutions to maintain their internalization goals despite declining domestic enrollments. Global reach. The University Without Walls model can also facilitate cross-border collaborations, enabling institutions to connect with international partners. For example, during the pandemic, universities used hybrid models to ensure education continuity with globally. This approach, which blends in-person and online learning, aligns perfectly with the idea of breaking down physical barriers, ensuring that international students can access the same education as their own campus peers. AI's role in international education. AI plays a crucial role in enhancing University Without Walls model, as it allows for personalized, adaptive learning experiences that cater to the diverse needs of international students. Personalized learning. AI-driven platforms integral to the University Without Walls concept provide international students with a tailored learning experiences that break down language and cultural barriers. With a declining domestic college-going rate, AI-supported internalization is the key to ensuring students from around the world can engage meaningfully with academic content, regardless of where they are. Administrative efficiency. The University Without Walls model, enhanced by AI, streamlines processes such as admissions and visa applications, which are critical for international students. By depending on AI to automate these processes, universities can expand their international student base, which is increasingly important given the financial and democratic pressures facing many institutions. Digital campuses, blending physical and digital learning. The University Without Walls model extends the idea of blending physical and digital learning into a seamless experience that supports both local and international students. This model ensures that education is no longer confined by physical campuses. Global access and flexibility. The rapid growth of online learning, with more than 50% of students now taking at least one online course, exemplifies the University Without Walls concept. By offering flexible learning environments that combine the best in-person and online education, universities can cater to international students who may prefer to begin their studies online before transitioning to on-campus learning. This flexibility is vital in attracting students from regions where relocating for education may be difficult. Digital learning. This hybrid model, central to the university without walls concept, allows students to participate in global academic communities regardless of location. For instance, international students who might face challenges attending traditional campuses can still engage in high-quality education through digital platforms while enjoying occasional in-person opportunities when feasible. AI and digital platforms, personalizing education. AI and digital platforms are integral components of University Without Walls framework. AI enables universities to offer personalized learning experience, adapting content to the needs of individual students, including those from diverse linguistic and cultural backgrounds. This is especially critical for international students who may require additional support in language, knowledge styles, and contextual understanding of course material. Inclusive and accessible education. The University Without Walls framework supports the democratization of education, ensuring that students from all socioeconomic backgrounds and regions can access high-quality education. By reducing the need for physical attendance and offering flexible online options, universities can reach undeserved populations, including those in rural areas, conflicting zones, or low-income regions. Conclusion. In closing, the University Without Walls concept offers a path forward for higher education, ensuring that institutions remain relevant and impactful in a rapidly changing world. By embracing flexibility, global collaboration, and sustainability, universities can meet the needs of a diverse global student population and lead the way in solving the world's most pressing challenges. Thank you all for your time, attention, and commitment to the future of education. Together, we can build a more inclusive and innovative and interconnected academic landscape. I look forward to seeing the strides we will make as we continue this journey landscape. I look forward to seeing the strides we will make as we continue this journey. Thank you very much for your listening.
First of all, I would like to thank Professor Dr. Mahmut Aydın for his amazing speech. We have a lot of students with us at the moment. This is exactly why our young students should attend these kind of conferences and also be extra careful to follow these kind of keynote speeches because we have learned a lot today. Do we have any questions for Professor Aydın? Because he mentioned a lot of new topics for us, many of which I heard for the first time, actually. So thank you. If we have any questions, he's still here. Professor Said, he's the head of International Relations Office at 19 Mayıs University. And he's a lifelong learner, so he has a question.
Thanks. Thank you very much, my dear rector, Professor Dr. Mahmut Aydın. I understand from your presentation, internationalization process turned to digitalization process. And is it, for your opinion, in near future, it can be a threatness, become a monopoly? For example, in Harvard University or Yale University, that is the mark of higher education. They can, with their strong infrastructure and investment to digitalization, and they can be a monopoly, establish a monopoly worldwide. Is it a territoriness it can able or not? Please.
I will start my reply with a joke. In my PhD years in UK, I attended a conference in Oxford. My supervisor told me they can ask you, if they ask you difficult questions, you never say, I don't know its answer. You say it is $100 question. We can talk about it on the meal. So as I said, actually, digitalization and more important for the digitalization is actually artificial intelligence. As far as I know, in many universities, artificial intelligence used too much. Maybe in the future, the big universities like Harvard, Princeton, and Oxford or Cambridge will start MA programs or PhD programs in abroad, in Turkey, in other countries with a cheap price. So in that time, the people in Turkey or other countries prefer to have a PhD or MA, not from the Turkish universities, maybe from Harvard, from the Princeton, from Oxford, from Cambridge. So I believe that all universities will prepare themselves the future developments. For that reason, actually, the University Without Walls model firstly introduced by European Association of Universities. As far as I know, 2 years ago, they published a document, Universities Without Walls, in 2013. Actually, I translated also that document to Turkish. It is on our web page. Also, recently, one of the journal in United States published a special documents in its name, I think, Higher Education in 2035. So in the near future, actually, students' enrollments will be declined even in Turkey. As far as I know, also, last 2 years after the pandemic, in Turkey, university students decline more than 1 million. So in the future, this declining number will continue. So we need to prepare ourselves both digital learning, both and artificial intelligence developments. Also, in Oxford University, as far as I know, started to use artificial intelligence for their own education programs also. So we keep going development. Is it okay? Buyur Alper Hocam. In the dinner, actually. We will talk about it later on. Thank you very much. Is there any question? Yes. Buyur.
Thank you for the insightful speaking session. I just had delivered my presentation on the topic transforming higher education digitally and strategies for achieving sustainability and internationalization in higher education. There I had mentioned emerging technologies, which includes artificial intelligence, cloud computing, IoT, and others. But in the last, I had mentioned some of the challenges for the HEI leaders and the policymakers. So I would like to mention one challenge that how you as a leader of HEI will address. It is the cost constraints with the emerging technologies in the higher education. So I just want to know that what are your plans as a leader with regards to cost constraints of these emerging technologies?
Çok anlamadım. Çok anlamadım ama ya kulağıma iyi gelmedi ses.
So
Belki böyle gelsin.
I just curtailed down my question
Uh,
that how
Tam anlamadım. Ha ne yapacağım? Tamam. Actually, University Without Walls model, for example, we are a new-based university. We are building our campuses just now. Our building is prepared for this model. For example, in some of the faculties, both inside the physical physical buildings, there is no walls, for example. All the classes will open each other. So the people interact with each other. The lecturer also interacts with each other together. Because if we build the buildings separately, both lecturers and students cannot interact with each other too much. The first thing is. The second one is, as I said in my answer to Professor Said, we are using artificial intelligence both in our administrating business and also in education, in our classes. Too much we are using it. We are using actually all the developments we are keeping going on. Thank you. Is there any question? No. Thank you very much.
Now, I would like to, okay. No. Normally we had a certificate presentation, but unfortunately our rectors had an emergency case at the hospital, so they have to attend that one. Now we will continue with our next keynote speaker. Okay, Professor, I'm extremely sorry, but Chinese names are a bit difficult for us to pronounce. So I believe it's Chiang Za from University of York University in Canada. I'm very sorry. He's an associate professor and at the moment coordinator of graduate diploma in post-secondary education, community, culture, and policy. Professor Za is an associate professor at the Faculty of Education in York University, Canada, and he has a very extensive career. Also, he is one of the leading researchers in his field, especially in internationalization. His scholarly interests include Chinese and East Asian higher education, international academic relations, global brain circulation, internationalization of higher education, global competence education, differentiation and diversity in higher education, theories of organizational change, and liberal arts education in China and elsewhere. His keynote speech will be about problematizing internationalization of higher education, China as the methodology. Welcome to our session. Dr. Za, can you hear us?
Yes, I can hear you. Can you hear me?
Yes, that's perfect. After this brief introduction, now the floor is yours. Everyone can hear and see you.
Great. Thank you so much. Yeah, you can see my PowerPoint, right?
Yes, we can.
Okay. Well, thank you for having me, for inviting me to this very important conference. So and now I realized the previous keynote speech was about internationalization and the digital technology. And now I'm going to connect internationalization to geopolitics. And you can see from my title, I'm going to problematize internationalization and also using China as a methodology. I will explain one by one why we need to problematize internationalization. What are the issues, are the problems with internationalization or facing internationalization, and why I use China as a methodology. Okay, so here is the internationalization we are used to. And we think it could continue like that. So I want to highlight two things here. One is the internationally collaborative research. You can see this is a figure from our colleague Simon Marginson's study. You can see over the years, we have more and more internationally collaborative research or publications. That is measured by the amount of publications. You can see by 2018, almost 23% of the total publications are or were internationally produced. Up to the last year, 2023, I believe some literature or research shows this figure rose to almost 25%. So that shows 1/4 of our research are now internationally collaborative. It has a lot to do with the universities because many of the researchers are university-based. Again, according to the research, let me see the figures. 85 to 90% of the scholarly papers involve at least one university-based researcher. So now people often use university and research together, if not interchangeably. So you can see one indicator of the internationalization we assume we're used to is the more and more internationally collaborative research. And those co-publications, international co-publications, made a lot of contribution to literature, to knowledge advancement, and to the frontiers of research, which is very good, positive, and we wish that would continue. On the right side, I will show you another indicator I would use to elaborate internationalization, which is the international mobile students or international students. And you can see we have more and more international students over the years. UNESCO started to record the number of international students from 1998. At that year, UNESCO recorded less than 2 million international students. And last year, it was tripled last year, almost 6.5 million international students. This is not only the amount, but also the impact. Of course, they have a lot of the academic impact. But here, I want to mention a research, interesting research done by British Council, that is the economic research, economic impact. Because the international students can create or produce economic impact at both ends, at host end and also in terms of their potentials, making the impact at the home end. So now the way of doing the GDP measurement doesn't include such economic impact of the international students. So the British Council made a quite interesting research. So they use the weighted international students weighted GDP measurement. So you can see here, The blue line is the for international students, and the black line is for the traditional way to measure the GDP. You see there's a gap. If you put the weights of international students, and you can see the new GDP line is this purple line, purple dashed line. So the point to make here is the international students can really produce significant economic impact. They can help raise the global GDP. So those are the things I want to mention about the internationalization, or the internationalization we are very used to. Some further points to make about the internationalization we assumed in terms of the internationally collaborative research. And here on the up figure, you see more and more countries are now involved in the internationally collaborative research. Those dots are the countries. More and more countries are now involved in international co-publications. And some countries, they have a very high percentage of their research papers are internationally collaborative. So here you see the shares of the international co-publications are moving towards more and more balanced or even situation. The traditional power territories like North America and Europe, they do have very high shares, but their shares are moving down, as opposed to Asia and some other regions, they have more and more shares in the international co-publications. That's also a good sign, correct? And in the study of higher education, we know the famous equation center periphery, right? The North America, West Europe used to be the center zone. And now we have Asian countries and other countries including the Middle East. They are contributing more and more international co-publications, meaning they are making progress from periphery to the center zone. So those are all the things I can cite about internationalization we used to in the past few years. Nevertheless, we're going to talk about problems. So what is the problem? Oh, sorry, I have some more slides. More and more countries, they are involved in internationally collaborative research. So here I have a figure to show the G20 countries. The G20 countries, they not only making the most contributions to the global GDP, global economic development, and also very much involved in producing the knowledge. So here is the percentage of the G20 countries in the internationally collaborative publications. And you can see Turkey is here. And I believe Turkey was making a very significant progress. Its internationally co-publications were less than 20% in up to 2016, but now up to 2021, the Turkey's share of international co-publications rose to 24.3%. So Turkey was making quite a significant progress in terms of internationally collaborative research. In this scenario, China stood up as a major player or a contributor to internationally collaborative research. So this line shows the green line and shows China's the contribution. So was on the rise and more significant from 2010 and up to most recently, as a major or most frequent partner with the United States. US is the the top R&D country in the world. And China, in the past 15 years also, China rose to be the most frequent partner in terms of R&D or internationally collaborative research partner with the US. And that indicated my point, why I choose China as a case study. I will explain more later on. Nevertheless, things began to change most recently. China used to be the top source country for international students in the US, but not anymore. Right? You can see on the left hand, in the peak year 2015, there were almost or around 300,000 Chinese international students in the US, but now dropped to 2023, only around 100,000 Chinese international students in the US. China is now no longer the top source country for US in terms of international students. Well, as I mentioned, US and China, they remain to be the most frequent research partner for each other. But there's a turning point. Again, there's a turning point. The right figure is about international collaborative research. And so this line, the data is based on China's data. Right? So this line is the US frequency in terms of collaborating with China. So you could see clearly around 2018, that was a turning point going down. But still, the US, given the legacy from the past, the US is still the top or the most frequent research partner with China. And you can see Japan also indicates a decline tendency, as opposed to some other countries, and China still either have a stable research relationship or even some rising relationships. Things are changing, right? Or changed a lot. And those are the problems. Of course, if you connect those issues and problems with the geopolitical changes and shifts, and you can see a lot of the issues and problems. And that's why we need to problematize internationalization. So here, just to summarize the new landscape or the changing landscape of internationalization. So we do see more and more ethically questionable measures in the name of the research or the national security, right? Many countries, they now apply restrictions in terms of taking the students from China, in terms of doing research collaboration with China, and severely linking international research collaboration to the national security, as I mentioned just now, progressively aligning the mobility of international students with the knowledge, science, diplomacy, and also economic dependence. Well, in the past, the more international students, the better. Not anymore. Many countries now, they see international students as the source of the deficit of the social life infrastructure. So they put limitations or restrictions on international students. They see international students as a source of the problem. And for them, at extreme position, some countries like the US, they even link the presence of international students to the notion weaponizing international students for the strategic purpose. So those are some of the issues I can mention in this short presentation about internationalization. So I'm going to use China as a case study. Before that, I need to share you quickly about the analytical framework. So two major theories I will draw upon to build my analytical framework. One is the neo-realism or the structural realism, which is, a theory in the field of international relations. Different from the classic realism, the neo-realism emphasizes the structural nature of the international system as the key determinant of the state's behavior in international relations. So central to the thesis of neorealism is the notion of this security dilemma or the anxiety. Once a country feels the security anxiety, that would lead to a lack of trust between the states, and it renders the states to be on guard against each other. So the states are quite similar in terms of the goal, the agenda for modernization or for development. So in terms of needs, but not in capabilities for fulfilling those needs. Such a structural difference of the capabilities then would condition the cooperation among the states with the fears of relative gains by others and the possibility of dependence on other states. So those are the theoretical explanation of some issues or the reasons behind the current internationalization scenarios. The second theory I would use for my analytical framework is the clash of civilizations. We all know that Huntington raised such a notion of clash of civilizations. Now, Alex, I would explain quickly why I need such a theory. It's because neoliberalism is often criticized as putting too much emphasis on the structure of the state, while neglecting their unique characteristics and also the units within the state. And that's why I want to introduce the notion of the clash of civilizations, because civilizations and cultures are doomed to influence shaping the state structures and defining their unique characteristics. And more specifically, because I use China as a case study, so Huntington believes that China's goals are to reassert itself as the regional hegemon. So he believes the rise of China poses one of the most significant problems or challenges or threats, whatever you use, to the West. That is very much connected to the case I'm doing now, which is China. And I'll explain specifically why I use China as the methodology. So we all know methodology is about the research strategy we would use or we decide to use in order to make a most significant or the critical study. China is chosen as a critical case study for being a major player in international education. We saw that, right? China used to be the most frequent contributor to internationally collaborative research, and China used to be the top source of international mobile students. So China has been a major player in international education, and somehow China is the reason triggering the current geopolitical changes. We all know that. I don't have time to explain, but we all know quite clear about that. So the China case would spotlight most aspects of problematizing internationalization currently. The China case study is embedded, arguably, in the China-US higher education relations, because those two countries are this R&D superpowers and the largest, second largest economies in the world, right? Their interactions, their relations, their competitions would undoubtedly have impact on others. So in this sense, the China-US higher education relationship is used as the ideal type for the purpose of illustrating the problematization. As I mentioned, such a relationship would definitely change the internationalization landscape and impact other higher education relations, either multilateral or bilateral. I'm now sitting in Toronto, in Canada. So the Canada-China higher education relations are very much impacted by the US-China higher education relations. Over the past decade, and the US stood as China's most frequent international research partner. Vice versa, China was also the US most frequent international research partner. And the US contributed as a co-author to over 40% of China's collaborative outputs, internationally collaborative outputs. So you can see the research ties between the two countries, how close, how solid it used to be until most recently. Let me drink a bit of water. Just quickly, because I will have 10 more minutes. So I will mention briefly. So again, this figure was produced by Professor Simon Marginson in his research paper about the activity, about the intensity of the international collaboration. By size of the circles, you can see this circle is the US, this circle is China. And the two countries are the most active collaborators in the internationally collaborative research. And just now, I showed you about the percentage of the G20 countries in terms of their internationally collaborative research outputs. So here, another figure on the same theme, but this is about the sheer size of internationally collaborative papers. You can see China and US, they are two top players in the field. And again, that would support my point. Using China as a critical case study and embed this case study in the China-US higher education relations would make a very strong case and critical case. The sheer size of the international collaboration of US and China, they're way above other players, other countries in the world. This side, this one. Now, so we'll go back to the theoretical framework. The US now is developing a security anxiety towards China. Again, I just want briefly. So this is quite interesting research showing the 8 measures about power. We don't have time to go through all the details, but you can see education is placed on the top. And China is now approaching the educational strengths. And as I mentioned, the educational strengths is now very much to a very high percentage the R&D strengths, right? So China is approaching the US. And if the US score is 2 and China is 1.6, it's very approaching. You can pick up the significance for today's knowledge-based economy. And many things about development would be based on R&D, would be based on innovations. So China is approaching quickly to the capacity of the US or capabilities of the US. There's some other things. Innovation is the second, very connected or interconnected with education, right? So here you see the US measures 1.9 and China has 1.8, very close. And of course, you can see why the US would have such a security anxiety towards China. So here's a chart I developed based on the 4 major global university rankings, which is the Shanghai rankings, the Times Higher Education rankings, the QS rankings, and US News rankings. We don't have time to go through the details, but those figures, again, would clearly show China is approaching the US in terms of the strengths of the university capabilities. Right. If we just take a look at the Shanghai rankings, with just two examples. One, Shanghai rankings, which is won by China, and the US rankings, by the US. The Shanghai rankings, the overall strength of higher education, China has overtaken the US, right? So China has more than 210 universities included in the Shanghai rankings. But China is still behind the US in terms of the top 200 universities, the top-notch universities still behind. Let's look at the US news. Again, China overtook the US overall system. China has more than 400 universities included in the US rankings, as opposed to the US less than 300. But again, China is behind in terms of the top-notch universities. So the top-notch universities are still the strengths for the US. And I guess that's why the US developing the strategies to safeguard the research outcomes, and also even the access to those top-notch universities by the Chinese students and by Chinese scholars. Okay, I have only 5 minutes. So quickly, I want to go through and just guide you through the analytical fabrics. So here I use 3 analytical fabrics. One is the political logic. So now we see a turning political logic, and the US and allies, most in West, increasingly shifts perception of China from a driving force for globalization to a free rider in the process. And I think free rider is the term used specifically by President Obama about China. Now a threat to the current world order anchored by the Western democracies. In the higher education and knowledge sphere, China is growingly viewed as a free rider in terms practicing espionage on the Western intellectual properties and excessively benefiting from the Western intellectual properties for its own development or prosperity. And China is now placing an emphasis for China's part. It is now placing emphasis on the Chinese model of modernization. That shows China is determined to follow a different pathway to modernization, different from the Western model, different from Western democracies, and whereby the universities are pivotal in providing the resolution. So now both the US and China, or West and China, they all align higher education with political agendas. That means reinforcing the national interests and security through the development of the higher education, through the growth of higher education. So this is the turning political logic. So next slide, I want to elaborate a shifting economic logic. As I indicated just now, the massive presence of Chinese international students used to be measured as a positive indicator. Well, most countries welcome Chinese students, but not necessarily the case anymore. Such a scenario is gradually perceived as economic dependence or potential risks, which is further intertwined with concerns over the strategy of politicizing or even weaponizing international students for specific strategic purpose. And blames being shifted on international students for deficits in the social and life infrastructure, which has triggered tightening and cutting down on the quotas of international students, which is happening in the country I'm living now, Canada, and also in Australia. Maybe you know in some other countries also they are cutting down the quotas for international students. In Canada, such a cutting is quite significant, more than 40% of the international students every year. So a growing number of Chinese students are now opt for studying at home or in Hong Kong, and due to decreasing or declining economic return of studying abroad and more expensive for studying abroad. And also the regional international education hubs like Japan, Singapore, Malaysia, and so on and so forth. The last logic for my case study is the academic logic. So now we can see the growing adoption of knowledge science diplomacy, rendering the academic exchange and collaboration to serve the national interests in China and in the West. So China is aligning internationalization with the geopolitical strategies like the Belt and Road Initiative, or BRI, and also China is seeking leadership in the Global South via schemes including the education. China is now the second most popular destination for African international students. Again, here I want to use incidentally the number 300,000. So now China has over 300,000 African students, as opposed to 10 years, almost 10 years ago, China had 300,000 Chinese students in the US. This is interesting, right? And China is the second most popular destination, next only to France for African students, while Western international students are very few in China. Last year, there were only 685 American students in China and 703 Japanese students in China. You can see sharp contrast. In the meantime, the US and its allies applying restrictions, very strict restrictions to Chinese students, what they can study in those countries, to academics with respect to what they can research with China. And China, for China's part, China is now endeavoring to build an independent, in other words, self-controlled knowledge system. I'm still watching that, following that. What does that mean? The Chinese independent knowledge system. Implication for internationalization. As I mentioned, the two superpowers, of course, their competitions would have in impact on all aspects, right? One is the involving internationalization leading towards de-Chinization. This is the term created by a American scholar, so it's a bit new to me. And China maneuvers to balance the swing pendulum, leverage its economic and R&D strengths, as well as unique soft powers. So here, I want to remind you again the notions and ideas raised by Huntington in his famous piece, The Clash of Civilizations. And he argues the Chinese civilization has proximity to many non-Western civilizations, like Islamic, Buddhist, Hindu, Japanese, Orthodox, African, and so on and so forth. That's why China can leverage such soft power. It is a soft power, right? So there's an emerging pattern of internationalization, aligning with the geopolitical division or the regionalization. And so here I would like to draw upon the American political scientist, Ihecon. He raised a new framework with Global West, Global South, and Global East. I want to skip that. And again, it's about China's R&D strengths. China is leveraging China as such R&D strengths. China is now the top producer of the science and technology papers, and China's top citations moving up quickly. And China is making significant progress in more and more fields of the academic research and study. I will skip that. So I want to conclude my presentation with such a slide. So with that, competitions, between the US and China. So now we see a new pattern of internationalization emerging. Not the same pattern as it used to be. Same pattern was the whole globe as the leveled field. Not anymore. The whole globe is now divided into three major geopolitical regionalizations. I put a question. Here. I put it here. It's not the geographic regionalization. It's the geopolitical regionalization. Right. So we have the global West. It is mostly the traditional Western democracies led by the US. And we have the Global East, roughly the BRI countries, supplemented by the BRIC countries, and also by the Shanghai Cooperation Organization countries, which is led by China. Then we have a Global South, which is derived from the Group 77, but now approaching almost 130 developing countries, traditionally led by India. So those are the three divisions. They are divided by geopolitics. The Global West and the Global East, they are the realistic poles in today's geopolitics. The Global South, not necessarily. So that's why I used the dash line for the Global South. So those are the new patterns of the internationalization of higher education. There are interactions among the three geopolitical regionalizations, but for the Global East and Global South, because they have a lot of overlaps, so you can see the intensity and also the activity of the interactions are very high. I use the size of the arrows to indicate such intensity and activity, as opposed to less extent between the Global South and Global West, and even less between the Global West and Global East. I do have a conclusion page, but I think I mentioned all the points, so I don't want to repeat and waste the time. So thank you so much for your time listening to my presentation.
Professor Zha, thank you for this wonderful presentation. Actually, we are very lucky to be here today. This was not just a regular presentation or a keynote speech. This was just like a master class, I guess. We learned a lot today. Thank you again, Dr. Zha. Especially I, benefited much from it. Actually, China is becoming a superpower, just like Dr. Zha mentioned in his speech, an unstoppable power. Actually, in Times Higher Education's current 2025 edition, the World University Rankings, China closes the gap and closes the gap to top 10. Now they have a university placed in 12th and another one placed in 13th, which is Tsinghua University in the 12th and 13th in Peking University. This is a huge accomplishment. Congratulations. And their research impact, as indicated, is unbelievable. Soon, we are expecting mainland China to have several universities in the top 10 in Times Higher Education. This is important because certain ranking systems favor certain continents or countries, and China approaching top 10 in the British Times Higher Education ranking system is especially significant. So, do we have any questions? I mean, it was a very comprehensive speech, but maybe if there are any points that you would like to discuss. Professor Vincent Kakembo is with us today. He is visiting us from Uganda. He is the Vice Chancellor of Mutesa I Royal University in Uganda, capital of Uganda, Kampala. This is his second time with us in Turkey, in Samsun. He's a dear friend. And yes, Professor, we are waiting for your question. Do we have a mic? If you like, you can maybe.
It's a very important keynote address to listen to, and we've learned a lot. And the presentation brought more on China and US, that comparison. But there's also an issue of the North-South divide, especially in knowledge and innovation and science, that sort of thing. He's talked about the restrictions students face when it comes to going to US or even China, now that we do have quite a number of international students. But in the light of the university without also barriers as per the previous presentation by Professor Mohammed, I would think that yes, thank you very much, those restrictions could be ameliorated or reduced if, for example, we used the digitalization of education more, because students from the South usually face like immigration problems, getting visas to go and or study at Harvard or other leading education centers. But they're not interested to go to the US or that. But if the US or China brought education closer to the people in terms of collaboration, well, closer to the people in Africa, intensifying collaboration, and for example, bringing centers or even interacting digitally or online, that will reduce the need for all students to have to go to Harvard and that kind of thing. And the kind of problems which are caused by the widening divide between the North and South do not affect the South only. You talk about pollution, climate change, they also all global problems. So I think the professor could possibly explain more on that. How could we reduce that divide and how could we enhance that collaboration without students having to migrate to centers of excellence, for example, Harvard? Yeah.
Thank you. Thank you, Professor Nisim. Professor Zha, could you hear the entire question?
I think I captured a portion, maybe the most parts of the question. I tried to respond to that question. I appreciate the question from African colleague. Okay, let me just start with making a point. Today, we are still in a globalized epoch. So often people say we have a lot of global issues. I believe some issues also included in the question. We often say global issues require global resolutions. So the ideal picture would be the US-China join hands, because given their strengths, given their abundance in the resources, if they can join hands to provide support to the global South. Unfortunately, it's not the scenario anymore. My understanding is the decoupling is on the way. More and more separation will be witnessed between China and the US. But still, they can provide support to the global South individually or separately. And China is now using the BRI. BRI is questionable. I cannot determine for sure it is all positive. But China obviously is embedding more and more educational initiatives in the BRI. BRI, I think, primarily is economic initiative, but China is placing more and more educational components. Some of my friends that are working with UNESCO, and they told me China is putting a lot of educational components, especially vocational education components in the BRI. So that is kind of the support to the global South countries. Digitally, of course, today we are using a lot of the digital technology, not only for the global South, even for the global North or global West or global East. It's more and more necessary to use the digital technologies, because given the AI, I believe the previous presentation talked a lot about AI, it's not necessary to use the lectures for knowledge transmission. And students can use AI and technology and software to generate much better platform for knowledge transmission and learning. So now we need to have professors to give the lectures can really guide students to reason, to look into the future, especially look into the uncertainties. So my point is, everywhere we need to use the digital technology to deliver the best part of education. I'm not sure if I have responded all the points in the question.
Professor Zha explained very crucial parts, especially regarding AI. But since he couldn't fully understand the first part of the question, Professor Vincent also asked the current divide. You focused in your presentation about the competition between the United States and China. But he also mentioned that there is a deep divide between not just US and China, but also the North and the South, if I'm not mistaken. So also he mentioned some parts where certain students from certain countries like China or maybe some parts in the South which cannot get visas or travel opportunities to the northern part, let's say, there's a fierce divide between these sections. So he asked your opinion about this divide as well, not just the US-China competition, but the North and the South divide too. If Professor Vincent wants to add more. Okay.
Thank you for this clarification. Now I get a better picture of this question. Indeed, there's a divide. And somehow China is taking advantage of this. Over the past 2 decades or so, the whole world witnessed China was putting a lot of efforts and a lot of resources developing the economic ties and also ties in other aspects, including the social development, education with African countries. It is somehow positive, at least China is providing the resources and also the development ideas, including educational development for the African countries. And on the other hand, some people would argue China developing soft power in the African countries. But anyway, you can see the ties between China and Africa growing, ever growing in the past 2 decades. I can sense China has a lot of influence in African countries. As I mentioned in my presentation, China is now the second most popular study abroad destinations for the African students. Over 300,000 African students are now in China. Maybe the figure is even larger than 300,000. That shows the tie. For the developed countries or the global West, my sense is the aids from the global West or traditional core zone in the global North is not as robust as it used to be, which can be understandable given the complicated geopolitics, given the internal complications or troubles, let's just put it that way, in those countries. So as I mentioned, China could be taking advantage of such an opportunity, developing the ties or reinforcing the ties with Africa. And that's pretty much my observation.
Thank you very much. Professor Vincent, was it clear enough now? Thank you very much. Do we have any other questions? We have, I think you are a student with us, I guess. Can we have the mic? Professor Zha, we have a student with us who would like to ask.
Great. Yeah, I look forward.
Thank you.
Hello, Mr. Professor. I'm not sure if you're present while Mr. Rector made his remarks about, more specifically, he addressed a challenge about a decline in the enrollment of the U.S. International students enrolling in the United States. And now you have made your remarks about China and U.S. ties. I want to precisely and briefly want to know your stand and your opinion on can we find any trail of China on this? More specifically, does any increase in quality and offering vacancies in China for international students lead to this decline? 3.5 million decline, I guess, within 11 years for the United States enrollment of international students in the US. Does China lead to this or no? It might be of diminishing or the decrease in the quality education in the US. What would be your stand? I would wonder to know. Thank
I think I captured most parts of the question, but not the final a few sentences. You mentioned that the declining quality. Can you elaborate that? I don't think I captured that part.
Mikrofonu geri alabilir miyiz?
Sorry?
We are getting the mic to the question.
Okay.
Just a second, please. Okay.
while saying the decline in quality of education, I mean for the US, is there any decline in quality education in the US lead to this or no? Any China trail we can find any China trail on this, or offering more vacancies for international students and enhancing the quality education in China? Is it of their reasons? Are they relevant to the US or no, to China?
I want to start backwards. Quality of higher education. If you look at specifically each of the parts you mentioned, US and China, you cannot really say they all face the declining of quality of higher education. They're all making efforts instead to raise the quality of higher education. But your question touches upon one of my research projects. Overall, we do have the quality issues with the university education. It's not about whether or not those systems can maintain their previous level of practice. It's all about the overall situation of university education across the world are not necessarily geared towards the future needs. In other words, this is not directly responding to your point, but I want to mention that across the world, the universities are at a crossroads. The previous practice, no matter how hard you maintain the previous practices or the level or the standards, they are not necessarily for the future needs. All the universities across the world would require transformations. So this is a quick point I want to mention that about. In terms the US, China help fill out the gap between the global north and global south. I think they are making efforts, and China for sure, because China is now, I mean, given this geopolitical new contexts, China is eager to develop its allies, right? US used to have a strong alliance or alliances. China needs allies, and the BRI is China approach to developing such allies. And now you see there are between, I don't have exact number, it's between 130 and 150 countries on the BRI list. And China is developing close and close economic ties wherever possible, including education and collaboration with those countries. And those countries all developing in most needs for the development. So China is now pouring efforts for that. But again, the point, I'm glad I have this opportunity to make my final point, which is the geopolitical regionalization. Remember the three circles, right? It is very, this is, in my view, is emerging pattern of the new landscape of internationalization. But it is all contingent on the sustainable economic development and R&D development in China. Whether China can sustain such a momentum for its development is questionable. So I just use that as an emerging pattern. Whether they're going to come, they're going to stay, it is going to be sustainable. It's all contingent on the China's further development in terms of economic growth. Thank you.
Thank you. I think the question now is clearly answered. Okay. I think we do not have more questions. Yes, we do not. Professor Zha, it was a pleasure to host you tonight, this evening. We thank you for your valuable contribution to our conference, which is the first. Hopefully, we will conduct the next edition the following year, and you will be with us again. This is an open invitation. from 1 year before. We have also a digital certificate for you, which we will send it to you soon. Thank you for your contributions. Now,
Thank you
we-
very much, and it's my honor.
Dear participants, ladies and gentlemen, this was the final session for today. We close with Professor Za and his speech on the which focused on the Chinese side of the internationalization efforts. The name of the conference is quite difficult to pronounce for the speakers, which I observed today. Just a quick reminder, in about 15 minutes, there will be a shuttle bus in front of this building, which will take you to the gala dinner, which will be held at the Samsun Metropolitan Municipality's multipurpose hall. So we will gather outside. I also would like to thank Professor Za again, because in his speech, we learned a lot. I also gathered some valuable information about my own country, Turkey. He shared a lot of data about us and our research output, especially in the recent years. I will study his presentation again. Thank you. I again would like to thank our first keynote speaker, Professor Kimberly. Her presentation was also amazing. It's one of my fields. I also study languages, and it was very insightful. Thank you again. And I forgot to introduce myself when I first came here. My name is Tolga Arslan. I work for several departments in the university, and I am a last minute addition to the organizing committee of this conference, but it was quite stressful, even it was just a few weeks. So again, thank you for the entire committee. They have been working on this for months, and their hard work really shows, I think. And that's it. Thank you very much. We will be meeting again tomorrow, starting from 9. Have a good rest. Maybe you can chill out in the hall. Thank you. Thank you, Dr. Za, for joining us today.
Thank you so much for having me.